Hi everyone, it's Kino here. Thanks for joining me in this Ashtanga Tune Up series. We're going to tune up some of the poses in the Ashtanga practice and help you understand what's really going on in some of these complex poses, these asanas, which we practice hopefully every day, 6 days a week. This class is going to look at Parigasana. So this is an asana that comes in the Ashtanga Yoga Intermediate series. It's toward the end of the practice. And this is an asana I feel like many people just don't know what's going on in this. We have the basic outlines of what the asana is meant to contain. So we have like the bare bones structure, but we don't understand what's happening. It's almost like we have the architecture of the asana, but we don't know how to use the building. And let's take a look at how our Parigasana can really best be articulated. So Parigasana, we are bending one knee and internally rotating the hip joint, and then making a 90-degree angle between the knees. So the 90-degree angle is something that gets repeated quite often in the Ashtanga practice, and Janu Sirsasana from primary series, we also have 90 degrees between the knees. So in this asana, we have 90 degrees between the knees, except the foot is hidden in the back. Now, when we take Parigasana position, the sort of bare bones outlines that we're given are that 90-degree angle, and we're holding onto the foot, and that this elbow should be off the ground. Well, besides that, there's kind of like a lot that's left along the way. So the first thing that often happens is that we need to be careful not to hike the hip up off the ground. So the first thing that happens is we want to be able to develop enough internal rotation of the hip joint to really keep the pelvis grounded. One of the things that helps with this is to actually forward fold so that you can lean kind of down into the space between your legs with your torso, splitting the difference between that 90-degree angle. This will help you kind of keep the hips grounded. Once you have the hips grounded, however, we need to be able to do more in the asana. So the purpose of this is not really just to do the forward fold, otherwise we'd be doing maybe some of the asanas of primary series. We're using this as the foundation. Next, we can keep the left elbow on the ground for a moment and then begin to open twist. Some of you will be able to put the head on the ground, but others of you will be able to put the head on the shin bone. Shin bone is where we kind of want to end up, and then we're going to get that left shoulder to kind of drop in. Next, don't worry about grabbing the foot. The foot is there and you can reach up for the foot at any time. If you reach for the foot right now, you're going to keep your torso closed and it's going to feel more like a forward fold, primarily targeting the left inner thigh, which, hey, that's good, but we can do a little bit more in the asana. So when we're thinking about Parigasana, this is the foundation. The forward fold is the foundation. Next, keeping the left elbow on the ground, I want you to explore open twist. So just kind of open the twist a little bit and let your torso spiral up and around. And we're gonna get a little bit more traction on the space between the ribs and the hips on the right side. After you feel that open twist, we can reach down, holding onto the foot, and continue that spiraling action as though the rib cage lifts away from the hips and spirals open. The sternum wants to reach up towards the ceiling, and then this is the way that, we can kind of combine that forward fold action, grounding of the hips, and an open twist. When you come out of the asana, let's try to close the twist, grounding the hips a little bit more, and then working yourself all the way up. You're gonna feel that really strongly on the space between the ribs and the hips. So now, let's try the other side, all right? Once we get these foundational movements established, we can explore a little bit more. So, what you wanna avoid in the asana, let's take a look at that. Closing the knees too much, so the angle is too short. Opening the knees too much, so it ends up feeling more like a straddle and less like that 90-degree movement. So we're really allowing that internal rotation to help ground the hip. When we move the knee out to the side, it starts kind of like ungrounding the hip a little bit. And then some other things to avoid are leaning too much back when you're doing the asana, or again, reaching towards the foot and just kind of turning it into a side bend forward fold. So we enter the asana, our tradition says we should hold on to the hips and inhale, prepare, and then exhale, enter the asana. So we're gonna take as many breaths as you need to kind of find that articulation. So just go through the movement. We're kind of bending forward, and we're getting the forward bend there. Notice if there's any pressure on the knee, and it is completely okay to elevate the hips to protect that left knee a little bit. You can get the forward fold, and then we're leaning in. Now we start to kind of get that side bend. Your head could touch the ground at first, but then eventually it wants to kind of pop up
onto the shin. The right shoulder is now going to curl under. You're watching the left hip so the left hip doesn't spiral too much up. But right now I want you to root into your right elbow and show me an open twist. Let's hold that for 5 breaths. We have 1. Resist the twist by activating with the left knee a little bit. 2. Feel the ribs kind of spiraling away from the hips. 3. Nice. We're going to roll a little inward with that right thigh to make sure that the hips don't try to compensate for what the torso should be doing. And 5. Then you can just gently hold onto your foot. Don't hold the foot too much. And then this is how we kind of articulate the asana. Draw the navel in, and the navel will help ground your pelvis. When it's time to come out, we can drape the hands down, kind of follow that same track all the way up, and hands on the waist. All right, so let's say that it's completely impossible to bend the knee that much. So if it's going to be hard for you to bend the knee, then we can kind of take the same idea of Parigasana, except we can come completely elevated. So if you're coming completely elevated, then the hand can go to the ground and we can still get that same feeling of open twist and reach over. So we're getting the same feeling. This is kind of like an elevated variation of Parigasana. So we're getting that feeling as we shift forward, open twist, and then this requires quite a lot of strength, so it's not necessarily easier to do this version. Let's try the other side. So it's almost like here Parigasana was on the ground, and then we lifted Parigasana up off the ground, coming up into a balance. Right? This is also something you could do perhaps with the assistance of a block or a chair. So we could put the block down. If that reach towards the ground is not accessible yet, the lift is open, twist spirals open, and then exhale, we reach over. Now, an interesting thing about the elevated version of Parigasana is that you kind of really have to stabilize the pelvis. You can't really lift it any more than it's lifted. So this allows you to really find that movement, all right? Exhale will come out of that one a little bit differently. So those are some things to think about in your Parigasana pose. Probably the most important takeaway is that you want to find that open twist. This is the thing I noticed that most people miss when they practice Parigasana. They're closing the chest and just really focusing on the kind of external form of holding the foot or getting the elbows off the ground or doing something with the pelvis. Remember, we want to always ask, why is this instruction there and what's the root of the instruction? The elbows would naturally come off the ground if we're doing an open twist. The pelvis would naturally be grounded if we're using the grounding of the pelvis as the foundation for the open twist. So you always want to ask, what is this alignment pointer about? What is the architecture of this asana leading to in terms of form and function? And that will help you kind of give every pose a little bit of a tune-up. As always, keep exploring. There's no definitive, always, forever answer. It's your body. You want to find the path of movement that works best for you. Thanks so much for joining me on this practice. I hope you keep the inspiration to continue your practice.